Chapter 2, Part 3. My mother announced that it was time to open presents. She always insisted I do this in front of everyone, which was a problem because, as I may have mentioned already, I'm not a good liar. That also means I'm not good at feeling gratitude for regifted CDs of country Christmas music or subscriptions to Field and Stream. For years, Uncle Les had labored under the baffling delusion that I am outdoorsy. But for decorum's sake, I forced a smile and held up each unwrapped trinket for all to admire until the pile of presents left on the coffee table had shrunk to just 3. I reached for the smallest one first. Inside was the key to my parents' 4-year-old luxury sedan. They were getting a new one, my mom explained, so I was inheriting the old one. My first car. Everyone oohed and ahed, but I felt my face go hot. It was too much like showing off to accept such a lavish present in front of Ricky, whose car cost less than my monthly allowance at age 12. It seemed like my parents were always trying to get me to care about money, but I didn't really. Then again, it's easy to say you don't care about money when you have plenty of it. The next present was the digital camera I'd begged my parents for all last summer. "Wow," I said, testing its weight in my hand. "This is awesome." "I'm outlining a new bird book," my dad said. "I was thinking maybe you could take the pictures." "A new book?" my mom exclaimed. "That's a phenomenal idea, Frank. Speaking of which, whatever happened to that last book you were working on?" Clearly, she'd had a few glasses of wine. "I'm still ironing out a few things," my dad said quietly. "Oh, I see." I could hear Uncle Bobby snickering. "Okay," I said loudly, reaching for the last present. "This one's from Aunt Susie." "Actually," my aunt said as I began tearing away the wrapping paper, "it's from your grandfather." I stopped mid-tear. The room went dead quiet, people looking at Aunt Susie as if she'd invoked the name of some evil spirit. My dad's jaw tensed and my mom shot back the last of her wine. "Just open it and you'll see," Aunt Susie said. I ripped away the rest of the wrapping paper to find an old hardback book, dog-eared and missing the dust jacket. It was The Selected Works of Ralph Waldo Emerson. I stared at it as if trying to read through the cover, unable to comprehend how it had come to occupy my now trembling hands. No one but Dr. Golan knew about the last words, and he'd promised on several occasions that unless I threatened to guzzle Drano or do a backflip off the Sunshine Skyway Bridge, everything we talked about in his office would be held in confidence. I looked at my aunt, a question on my face that I didn't quite know how to ask. She'd managed a weak smile and said, "I found it in your grandfather's desk as we were cleaning out the house. He wrote your name in the front. I think he meant for you to have it." God bless Aunt Susie. She had a heart after all. "Neat. I didn't know your grandpa was a reader," my mom said, trying to lighten the mood. "That was thoughtful." "Yes," said my dad through clenched teeth. "Thank you, Susan." I opened the book. Sure enough, the title page bore an inscription in my grandfather's shaky handwriting. "To Jacob Magellan Portman, and all the worlds he has yet to discover." I got up to leave, afraid I might start crying in front of everyone, and something slipped out from between the pages and fell to the floor. I bent to pick it up. It was a letter. Emerson. The letter. I felt the blood drain from my face. My mother leaned toward me and in a tense whisper asked if I needed a drink of water, which was mom speak for "keep it together, people are staring." I said, "I feel a little, and then, with one hand over my stomach, I bolted to my room. The letter was written on fine, unlined paper in looping script so ornate that it was almost calligraphy, the black ink varying in tone like that of an old fountain pen. It read, "Dearest Abe, I hope this letter finds you safe and in the best of health. It's been such a long time since we last received word from you. But I write not to admonish, only to let you know that we still think of you often and pray for your well-being, our brave, handsome Abe. As for life on the island, little has changed, but quiet and orderly is the way we prefer things. I wonder if we'd recognize you after so many years, though I'm sure you recognize us, Those few who remain, that is. It would mean a great deal to have a recent picture of you, if you've one to send. I've included a positively ancient picture of myself. E misses you terribly. Won't you write to her? With respect and admiration, Headmistress Alma LaFay Peregrine. As promised, the writer had enclosed an old snapshot. I held it under the glow of my desk lamp, trying to read some detail in the woman's silhouetted face, but there was none to find. The image was so strange, and yet it was nothing like my grandfather's pictures. There were no tricks here. It was just a woman smoking a pipe. It looked like Sherlock Holmes's pipe, curved and drooping from her lips. My eyes kept coming back to it. Was this what my grandfather had meant for me to find? Yes, I thought. It has to be. Not the letters of Emerson, but a letter tucked inside Emerson's book. But who was this headmistress, this Peregrine woman? I studied the envelope for a return address, but found only a fading postmark that read Cairnholm Islands, Cymru, UK. UK? That was Britain. I knew from studying atlases as a kid that Cymru meant Wales. Cairnholm Islands had to be the island Miss Peregrine had mentioned in her letter. Could it have been the same island where my grandfather lived as a boy? 9 months ago he told me to find the bird. 9 years ago he'd sworn that the children's home where he'd lived was protected by a bird who smoked a pipe. At age 7 I'd taken this statement literally, but the headmistress in the picture was smoking a pipe, and her name was Peregrine, a kind of hawk. What if the bird my grandfather wanted me to find was actually the woman who'd rescued him, the headmistress of the children's home? Maybe she was still on the island after all these years, old as dirt, but sustained by a few of her wards, children who'd grown up but never left. For the first time, my grandfather's last words began to make a strange kind of sense. He wanted me to go to the island to find this woman, his old headmistress. If anyone knew the secrets of his childhood, it would be her. But the envelope's postmark was 15 years old. Was it possible she was still alive? I did some quick calculations in my head. If she'd been running a children's home in 1939, and was, say, 25 at the time, then she'd be in her late 90s today. So it was possible. There were people older than that in Inglewood who still lived by themselves and drove. And even if Miss Peregrine had passed away in the time since she'd sent the letter, there might still be people on Cairnholm who could help me. People who had known Grandpa Portman as a kid. People who knew his secrets. We, she had written, those few who remain. As you can imagine, convincing my parents to let me spend part of my summer on a tiny island off the coast of Wales was no easy task. They, particularly my mother, had many compelling reasons why this was a wretched idea, including the cost, the fact that I was supposed to spend the summer with Uncle Bobby learning how to run a drug empire, and that I had no one to accompany me, since neither of my parents had any interest in going, and I certainly couldn't go alone. I had no effective rebuttals, and my reason for wanting to make the trip, I think I'm supposed to, wasn't something I could explain without sounding even crazier than they already feared I was. I certainly wasn't going to tell my parents about Grandpa Portman's last words, or the letter, or the photo. They would have had me committed. The only sane-sounding argument I could come up with were things like, I want to learn more about our family history, and the never-persuasive, Chad Kramer and Josh Bell are going to Europe this summer, why can't I? I brought these up as frequently as possible without seeming desperate, even once resorting to, it's not like you don't have the money, a tactic I instantly regretted. But it looked like it wasn't going to happen. Then, several things happened that helped my case enormously. First, Uncle Bobby got cold feet about my spending the summer with him, because who wants a nutcase living in their house? So my schedule was suddenly wide open. Next, my dad learned that Cairnholm Island is a super important bird habitat, and, like half the world's population of some bird that gives him a total ornithology boner lives there. He started talking a lot about his hypothetical new bird book, and whenever the subject came up, I did my best to encourage him and sound interested. But the most important factor was Dr. Golan. After a surprisingly minimal amount of coaxing by me, he shocked us all by not only signing off on the idea, but also encouraging my parents to let me go. It could be important for him, he told my mother after a session one afternoon. It's a place that's been so mythologized by his grandfather that visiting could only serve to demystify it. He'll see that it's just as normal and unmagical as any place else, and, by extension, his grandfather's fantasies will lose their power. It could be a highly effective way of combating fantasy with reality. But I thought he already didn't believe that stuff, my mother said, turning to me. Do you, Jake? I don't, I assured her. Not consciously he doesn't, Dr. Golan said, but it's his unconscious that's causing him problems right now. The dreams, the anxiety. And you really think going there could help? My mother said, narrowing her eyes at him as if readying herself to hear the unvarnished truth. When it came to things I should or should not be doing, Dr. Golan's word was law. I do, he replied, and that was all it took. After that, things fell into place with astonishing speed. Plane tickets were bought, schedules scheduled, plans laid. My dad and I would go for 3 weeks in June. I wondered if that was too long, but he claimed he needed at least that much time to make a thorough study of the island's bird colonies. I thought Mom would object. 3 whole weeks? But the closer our trip got, the more excited for us she seemed. My 2 men, she would say, beaming. Off on a big adventure. I found her enthusiasm kind of touching, actually. Until the afternoon, I overheard her talking on the phone to a friend, venting about how relieved she'd be to have her life back for 3 weeks and not have 2 needy children to worry about. I love you too, I wanted to say with as much hurtful sarcasm as I could muster. But she hadn't seen me, and I kept quiet. I did love her, of course, but mostly just because loving your mom is mandatory, not because she was someone I'd think I'd like very much if I met her walking down the street. Which he wouldn't be, anyway. Walking is for poor people. During the 3-week window between the end of school and the start of our trip, I did my best to verify that Miss Alma LaFay Peregrine still resided among the living, but internet searches turned up nothing. Assuming she was still alive, I had hoped to get her on the phone and at least warn her that I was coming. But I soon discovered that almost no one on Cairnholm even had a phone. I found only one number for the entire island, so that's the one I dialed. It took nearly a minute to connect, the line hissing and clicking, going quiet, then hissing again, so I could feel every mile of the vast distance my call was spanning. Finally, I heard that strange European ring. Wop wop, wop wop, and a man who I could only assume was profoundly intoxicated answered the phone. "Pisshole!" he bellowed. There was an unholy amount of noise in the background, the kind of dull roar you'd expect at the height of a raging frat party. I tried to identify myself, but I don't think he could hear me. "Pisshole!" he bellowed again. "Who's this now?" But before I could say anything, he'd pulled the receiver away from his head to shout at someone. "I said shut up, you dozy bastard! I'm on the—" And then the line went dead. I sat with the receiver to my ear for a long, puzzled moment, then hung up. I didn't bother calling back. If Cairnholm's only phone connected to some den of iniquity called the Piss Hole, how did that bode for the rest of the island? Would my first trip to Europe be spent evading drunken maniacs and watching birds evacuate their bowels on rocky beaches? Maybe so, but if it meant that I'd finally be able to put my grandfather's mystery to rest and get on with my unextraordinary life, anything I had to endure would be worth it. End of Chapter 2.